Hello and welcome to another episode of Wheel of Horror, the podcast where two lifelong childhood best friends spin a wheel every day leading up to Halloween. It chooses the horror film and they discuss it. Today we're talking about 1995's In the Mouth of Madness, which was directed by John Carpenter. I'm your co-host Alec.
And this is Joe.
Joe, dude, what a movie! I've never seen this movie.
That's great. I'm always happy when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the movies that you suggested for this October wheel, I haven't seen. And what did we cover? Day of the Dead, I had not seen. I have seen Halloween 6, and then this one, dude, and like John Carpenter, I was thinking about this, man. Like, I was just like, yeah, what else has John Carpenter done I haven't seen? And there's a few I haven't, but dude, from like, I don't know, whenever Assault on Precinct 13 came out, but from then until like this movie, dude, he has like some of my favorite movies of all time. I mean, it's incredible. He's such a good director.
Yeah, I mean, that run he goes on from, I think Assault on Precinct 13 was 76.
Okay.
And I feel like from there to like They Live in 88, that's like prime Carpenter, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, that's it, you forget how many great ones there are in there. And I feel like this one, especially since it's not in that prime period, does get forgotten sometimes. And it certainly was forgotten when it came out. I saw this one in theaters, a very empty theater, probably 12, 13-year-old me with my grandfather. Again, I dragged him along. And this movie I feel like has kind of been reevaluated in recent years. I feel like I'm hearing a little more about it these days. But I was a big fan of this one right from the get-go, and it's probably not a controversial statement to say I think this is easily his best movie of, outside of that prime period, outside of the 80s.
Well, have you seen Vampires, his 1995 movie?
Oh yeah, I saw that in theaters. And Village of the Damned actually came out right after this. I think that was 95 also. My poor grandfather had to sit through that one. Yeah, Vampires. Vampires would probably be second. I don't know if you want to, we could probably do a Carpenter ranking episode. But
Yeah.
yeah, I like Vampires. But, outside of that, it starts getting a little iffy for me with like Escape from LA, Ghost of Mars,
Oh
things like
yeah.
that.
I forgot about Escape from LA. Yeah. Yeah, I think 70s and 80s Carpenter, that's like obviously that's the period that I like, but I don't know if I've seen any of his movies aside from Escape from LA, past They Live. So this is all new territory for me. But this was good, dude. You can see there's a couple like the plot gets a little convoluted, but I kind of like that stuff because it reminds me of David Lynch a little bit. So I'm into that. But I can see why some people wouldn't like it.
I literally was one of the first things I meant to bring up was because I know you're such a David Lynch guy, and I'm really not. I've seen a handful of his movies, but to me, this feels like what I imagine most of David Lynch's movies feel like. I mean, I'm familiar with some of them, but this does remind me of Lynch, and I meant to ask you that.
Oh no, the whole time. I mean, specifically the scene on the bike when the kid is like riding the bike and it's in the dark and then it becomes an old person, like that really reminded me of David Lynch. Just obscure visuals, kind of weird sound effects, and then just left up to your interpretation of like, what is this? You know?
And for me, that's like the scariest moment in the movie. I will say something that maybe is a little controversial for me, and this stuff is all obviously very subjective. For me, this might be John Carpenter's scariest movie.
Hmm. The scene that I really remember actually being like, damn, that actually is scary is the little girl when she's like, "You're my mommy." And it's like
Hmm.
it's mommy time, but her makeup and like usually little kids don't scare me. That scared me.
Yeah.
But what specifically scared you?
I think it's more of just a tonal thing,
Mm.
just once they get to the town, and yeah, and how everything is just so strange, it's kind of hard to explain. It isn't necessarily any one moment, but just kind of a feeling and a tone. And yeah, the kid on his bike, but he's really old, and I think also that I can't make much sense of so much of this movie. It may also be why I've never been so really turned on by David Lynch, and why I find some of his work kind of unnerving is just it just feels weird and I can't really make sense of it. And to me, there's something frightening about that.
Dude, no, I totally I think that's why I like David Lynch's stuff because it puts me into like a headspace that I can't really replicate otherwise. It's just you're so uneasy, you don't know why, because you're looking at things that on paper seem not threatening. I mean, even in this movie, that town looks great. It's pristine, but there's this sense of unnerving underneath it all, and eventually it becomes exposed. But that's what I think David Lynch is so great at, and I think that John Carpenter did very well in this movie too. Oh yeah, but also the situation of this movie specifically is very scary. I mean, Sam Neill is pretty much just like, whatever, this isn't real. But by the end, he's totally into it. This situation would be something like a Black Mirror episode where you just don't believe it, and then you are trapped in this world where your life is a story and you have to do what has been written for you. And Halloween is scary in like the, oh God, a guy's coming to get me. But like, if this happened to you and you're put into a mental asylum and like nobody believes you, like that is a terrifying idea.
hmm And you could have told this story. I mean, it would have been a very different movie, but it didn't even necessarily need the supernatural aspect. It could have just been about people reading this author's work and losing their minds.
Mm,
It's funny. Like we talked a lot about movies or pop culture and their influence on people. We talked a lot about that in our Scream episodes, and the Scream movies talk a lot about that.
mm,
And it's interesting that this was kind of doing that a year before. There's pop culture references like Stephen King gets name dropped.
yeah.
I think in our Scream episodes, or maybe in our Wes Craven's New Nightmare episode, which that came out a year before this, I did mention how there was just something in the air at the time of us, referencing pop culture in movies, but also looking at things like horror movies and horror literature and wondering, does it have an effect on its audience? This movie gets into that a bit, and it could have just been about that, but it also has all this great supernatural stuff.
Yeah, man, I think you're right. I think in the 90s specifically, obviously, with all the movies you just mentioned, we're living in a postmodern horror world. Yeah, you're right. They're referencing Stephen King, and I guess like if this movie came out in the 70s, the audience would be a little bit like they wouldn't understand it as much, I think. But this is like, oh yeah, I've seen people freak out over movies before. I've seen people like like dude, when did that guy shoot Reagan and claim it was because he was reading Catcher in the Rye? I mean, that was before this.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I think people can understand this movie a little bit better in this period of time. But yeah, I mean, it probably did need the supernatural stuff. But one thing I did want to ask you though, because they do mention Stephen King, and I'm assuming in the 90s he was, I mean, just as popular as he is today, right? I mean, he was a household name in 95.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Probably more so, in all honesty,
Yeah.
especially at this time. I felt like we were just getting flooded with Stephen King movies in the early 90s. It was like Misery and Needful Things, The Dark Half, and I was seeing all of them. So I was very aware of who King was.
Right. So I guess I didn't like in this movie then where, some people didn't know who Sutton Kane was. And it's like who's Steve they made it seem like in the beginning like who's Stephen King? Like
Mhm.
Sutton King is such a big deal. But some people didn't know who he was. Like the old lady's like never heard of him. Well, I guess she would have been his story character though. So I guess that doesn't never mind. I don't know what
Right,
I'm talking about.
right.
But you know what? Do you want to give like a little brief intro to the film? I mean, just kind of how it gets started and what the plot is, and we can kind of walk through it a little bit because it's pretty confusing.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I mean, for a movie that I really like and have probably seen over a dozen times, there's still quite a bit I don't quite understand and would probably struggle trying to explain, but I'll do
Huh.
my best.
Yeah, yeah.
So Sam Neill plays this he's like an insurance investigator, he catches scam artists. And he is hired by this New York publisher to track down an author, Sutter Kane, who is, bigger than Stephen King. He has disappeared and he owes them his latest book, which is called In the Mouth of Madness. So he and this editor, a woman, I forget her name,
Styles,
Styles,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
They track down, or they believe Sutter Kane is hiding out in this little New England town that isn't even on any real map, but somehow they get there. And once they arrive, they encounter a lot of supernatural forces and monsters. And by the end, it looks like the forces of darkness have been unleashed and the world is at an end.
No, yeah, I mean, that's definitely like, the overall plot summary, but there's so much weird shit that goes on in between. And I mean, I guess like the first thing that we see is Sam Neill getting thrown into a mental asylum.
Mm.
And, we don't know who he is, we don't know what's going on. He's kind of, I mean, he's very upset in the beginning, but then when he gets locked away, he starts to draw crosses all over the room and he wants to stay there. First little thing I didn't love is when they're like, he only asks for a single black crayon. I'm like, man, you can't do all that with one crayon. But anyway.
Yes, I think you would need like a dozen boxes of crayons.
Yeah, and all over like your skin. I'm like, crayons don't do that. All right, whatever. Yeah, so then somebody comes. He's in Twin Peaks. He's in Titanic. I've seen
Yeah.
this guy in a million things. He's basically the before Game of Thrones, before that guy, he was like the pissed off British guy.
David Warner, yeah. There's quite a few memorable character actors in this movie, but yeah, David Warner I remember mostly from The Omen.
Oh yeah.
He's been in a ton of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I recognize pretty much everybody, and there's actually two people coming up. I can't wait to tell you. I'm sure you recognize them too, but yeah. So then we kind of get like a flashback to kind of explain how we all got here. But yeah, one of the things that we touched upon a little bit is there's this like hysteria going on where people that are reading these books are like breaking windows and like they're like bleeding out of their eyes, and they kind of look like zombies a little bit,
Hmm.
but they're still working. I mean, they're not like overthrowing the government, right? They just want the book.
Yeah, yeah, they're causing riots at bookstores, except for this one gentleman who tries to kill Sam Neill, and we come to find out this was the agent of Sutter Kane.
Right. Yeah. So there's that one random scene where this dude just like walks up to them in a diner with an axe and just smashes it through the window.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean that was pretty scary. That was a pretty scary moment right there.
Hmm.
That guy looked terrifying, and his eyes, his contacts looked like goat eyes or something. It was freaky.
Hmm.
So I want to ask you this though. I mean, obviously, like this is throughout the movie, but why was Sam Neill like a chain smoker? Like I know this is in the 90s. I know John Carpenter smokes, but like it just seemed a little out of place that his character it was just like constantly smoking cigarettes. What do you think that was?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, now that you mention it, I remember like whenever I would see an interview with Carpenter back in the day, he was always smoking.
Right.
But it could be just kind of like he reminds me his character reminds me of like an old film noir character, like a hard-boiled
Mm,
detective. So that could have kind of gone with the character. It is just some sort of character choice. I was just kind of reminded watching this movie how in the pre-Scream days, 90s horror was so unworried about filling their movies with old people. It's just like,
mm,
or not, they seemed totally unconcerned about appealing to teenagers,
right.
which, is kind of crazy for horror movies. Like, even just kind of this noir detective atmosphere reminds me of a bunch of other horror movies that came out in the 90s, like Lord of Illusions, and there was one later with Johnny Depp called The Ninth Gate.
Oh yeah.
And it just made me smile thinking how, it's not surprising that these movies were not at all popular, especially with teenagers. And, Scream definitely served an underserved community, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just funny how I feel like I could think of so many examples of just very mature casts in horror movies in the early 90s.
I think honestly, Carpenter's kind of always been like that. I mean, Halloween is an exception, and I guess,
Mhm.
I mean, not The Fog has Jamie Lee Curtis, but like the lead is Tom Atkins and the radio host. So like he's always like Roddy Piper was probably in his 40s when they did They Live. I mean,
You're totally right. Yeah, Carpenter definitely didn't try to play to that market. Wes Craven, I would say, did. I saw some YouTube video that referred to Craven as kind of like the John Hughes of horror.
mm.
But yeah, Carpenter, if he could have had his way, he would have been making westerns with Kurt Russell, so.
Yeah, yeah, but it is an interesting thing to think about because yeah, there are no young people in this movie. I mean, I think Sam Neill is like 45, 40, no, I think he's like 48 in this movie. Like he's up there.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I mean, it didn't bother me at all. But one, okay, I'll talk about the two actors that stood out to me immediately, and I was like, no way. So I guess he's like the town sheriff. He's like the leader or whatever, or he shoots himself in the head. Did you recognize that guy?
Oh, yes.
Okay, okay, dude. The second he went on screen, I was like, motherfucking Vigo. Like, did it? And I've never seen that guy in anything before, and I was just like, I know that guy immediately.
Yep. And it's funny. He had a different voice though in Ghostbusters 2. Max von Sydow does the actual vocal performance in that movie. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, cool. I did look him up, dude. He had a pretty sad life. He died in the early 60s. I mean, when he was in his early 60s, homeless.
Oh, wow.
I know. I looked him up. I was like, I bet this guy's done other stuff. And yeah, man, he had a pretty sad life. Kind of sucks.
Oh, that's too bad. He has a very memorable look.
Oh my God. I mean, I texted the picture to a bunch of my friends. I was like, you guys recognize this guy? They're like, Vigo the Carpathian. Like everybody recognized him. So, and then the other guy who I'm assuming you saw too, fucking Hayden Christensen's in this.
Oh, I don't think I knew that. He must be a kid.
He's the kid. He's the kid at the end when he's just like, hey kid, on the bike or whatever. He's like, do you need me to get help or whatever? That kid, that's Hayden Christensen.
I had no idea.
Dude, I was like, man, that kid's face looks familiar. And as I didn't look him up, and as the credits were rolling, it was a kid on bike, Hayden Christensen. I was like, no way, dude. So I don't know. I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, so the other thing is, okay, yeah, okay. There's two things. So this whole movie takes place in a place called Hobbs End, which is part of, is it Sutter Kane or Sutton? Sutter Kane.
Sutter.
Yeah, so it's part of Sutter Kane's like mythology. It's kind of like his Castle Rock. That's what I was thinking for Stephen King a little bit. Is that accurate, you think?
Yeah, but even more than King, this movie is very influenced by H.P. Lovecraft.
Right.
And, there's so many little references to Lovecraft peppered through this movie. And, you know, the, I, there were a lot of different towns in the Lovecraft mythology. And I forget which one kind of most resembles Hobbs End. But I mean, King himself is very influenced by Lovecraft. So, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, and this town, man, it really reminded me of Twin Peaks season three when they were driving into Twin Peaks. They like go through like a different dimension as they're going under the certain light, and it was exactly like this movie going into that bridge, and they go into Hobbs End, and I love that.
Interesting. Yeah.
My question is though, man, how did they know that was in New Hampshire? Like that when he cuts the book covers up or whatever and he makes the map of New Hampshire, can you explain that to me? Because I had no idea how he figured that out.
No, I can't explain it. Absolutely not. But
God,
I
okay.
will say I love it, especially the early parts of this movie before it just kind of goes off the rails. I really love like the kind of investigating, the mystery that like noticing there is some kind of map on the book covers and he cuts along the lines and puts them together and there is this map. I could only imagine, he realized it created the shape of New Hampshire and then decided that they would, and there is some kind of like X or something that marks the spot. So he decided that's where they would go or in or around there.
Yeah, I just wish there was something that made it a little more clear. Like he's like, "Oh, if I connect like there's a red dot on every single one of the covers, but it's so random." And then like he
Mhm.
cuts like I don't know, I just wish there was something a little more like that. But whatever, whatever. I can look past it. But yeah, they get to hot. Well, before that, what's his name? Sam Neill goes to the publisher's office and dude, Charlton Heston. Just
Mhm.
I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, he was definitely, it was a surprise to have him there because I've been rewatching all the Planet of the Apes movies slowly, and I forgot he was in Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes too. So I'm just happy to see him around. But yeah, so then basically he gets sent to Hobbs End with this woman Styles, and she works at the publishing company. And then when they get to Hobbs End, they check into this hotel, and then it's just creepy stuff. You get the grandma from Happy Gilmore and also Twin Peaks.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I gotta say, I love this town. I'm not sure where they shot it. I know Hayden Christensen is Canadian.
Yeah, it's Ontario. I looked it up. Yeah.
That makes sense. But I love this little town. Obviously it's very Stephen King and great like autumn vibes, very atmospheric. I just when they're strolling through the town, I love it. And did it make you think at all of Halloween 3? Like this
Hmm.
whole kind of mission, this man and a woman going to like some weird little town trying to solve a
Oh.
mystery. Like it all makes me think of Halloween 3, especially at the end when they're trying to escape and the woman turns on him on the side of the road. That's very Halloween 3. So I was thinking
Ooh.
about Halloween 3 quite a few times during this movie.
That is a very good call. I did not, but that actually is a very good call. A lot of the same beats. One thing it did remind me of though is for some reason Friday the 13th Part 8, all of the city alleyways and stuff, dude, it just reminded me of all the alleys in this movie. It was like, this is the New York. I can tell.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Canada usually is standing in for New York.
Yeah, just like I don't know, the burning barrels and stuff like that, and just the way the alleyways looked. I was like, looks a little more like Jason Takes Manhattan than actual Manhattan, Manhattan. But you know, but yeah, no, I now that you say that, though, 100%, this is like that movie. The only exception is Jamie Lee Curtis isn't like 35 years. Oh no, she's not in Halloween 3. Never mind, that other woman,
I know who you're talking about.
so much younger.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Tom Atkins just like a drunk. Yeah. But yeah, I thought their dynamic was pretty good. I mean, clearly Sam Neill's like really into her. And I don't really understand why she tried to kiss him in the hotel room the first time. But then I was thinking maybe it was just because she was written that way.
Right.
Because I was like, why is she trying to kiss him now? She's like, come on, help me. Like, I'll make out with you. It's like, this is kind of a weird. But yeah, so their dynamic was good. They had a good relationship. I'm trying to think, what's the first weird thing that sets them off? I mean, the painting probably, right?
I mean, I think just arriving in the town, which isn't even supposed to exist, is pretty weird. And then,
Right.
yeah, there's the painting, and she knows where the hotel is, even though she's obviously never been to this town, but she's read Sutter Kane's books, so she knows her way around this town.
Yeah, and I mean, and in case we haven't been clear about this, the town is basically a story that's written by Sutter Kane. So everything is hit like it's all fake, but it looks real. And they're starting to make references where Sam Neill is like, "This isn't real." Like, look, he said there would be a church behind this window, and he opens the window, it's not there, and it's like, "You idiot! It's the other window," and then it is right there. So then they start to reveal that, like, holy shit, like everything that is in this books are in this town.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
getting back to the location again, this church is a real place from what I
Mm.
understand, and it is absolutely terrifying.
It's like a real practicing like Catholic church though. I mean not Catholic, but like it's a church.
Yeah, it's a real church. It's like this wasn't created for the movie.
Wow. Okay. I thought it was just gonna be some weird building that they decorated. Wow, so you could go there.
Yeah. I mean, all the interiors, I'm sure that look like, hell. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's a set. But yeah, the exteriors are a real place in Canada.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's a creepy church. Yeah, it's like black on the outside. It's got these like kind of oranges, like diamonds, I guess. I don't even know what they are. But yeah, and then they go to that church because they're like, all right, well, let's go see what's going on over there. And then there's this big, oh, they think Jesus Christ. Is it Sutter? Sutter.
Yes.
I'm gonna pull it up. Okay, so yeah, it's just what I always say, right? Sutter. So they go to see if Sutter's in this church and it's locked, and then the whole town like descends on the church basically. But they kind of ignore Sam Neill and Styles, and they just kind of want Sutter.
Yeah, they've kind of just like wandered into this story, is what it seems like.
Yeah, because they all have guns and like get out here, and then Sutter releases the dogs, which I'm like, just shoot the dogs. But again, he's writing the story, so
Mhm.
when you're watching the movie, you're like, why are they doing this? But then in retrospect, you're like, well, okay, now it all makes sense. They're written this way.
Right. Yeah. You could kind of, I guess, write off anything you see as, oh, he's writing this story as we're going.
Right, right. And that's, I think, looking back, that's what I definitely am doing now.
Hmm.
But yeah, so there's a little standoff there, and then he tries to leave, but she steals the car and drives away. So then he confronts Sutter? I think I'm being lost here.
The next moment that really sticks out to me, and it's always been like a really just quick but haunting moment, is earlier in the movie. They're talking about something from one of Sutter Kane's other books that happened at that hotel. They're talking about like a monster that is seen in like there's like this greenhouse portion of the hotel.
Mm.
And later on, as Sam Neill is leaving the hotel at night, he sees that monster through the window. It's just like it's just kind of a quick little moment, but for whatever reason, that little scene has always just stuck with me and just I don't know, super creepy.
Yeah, because it's like they prepare you for it, but they don't show it. And then later on, they show it, but it's not in the way that you're expecting them to show it. It's just kind of
Right.
like a throwaway scare.
Yeah, it's so like matter of fact. That's what's kind of so creepy about it. It's not some big scene. It's
Right.
just like Samuel looks to the hotel and he sees this creature in the window, and that's it. That's the moment.
Yeah, no, this movie does have some really scary moments. I mean, even the moment I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but towards the end when Styles is like reading the book as he's looking into the darkness or whatever, and
Mhm.
like you don't see anything, but her explaining it, I'm thinking what I would be seeing if I was Sam Neill, and it's probably scarier than any puppets or whatever they could have shown in '95. But then you
Yeah.
do get to see a little bit of them chasing him as he's running.
Mhm.
And just the flashes, dude. It was just enough. It was just like American Werewolf in London, where it's like they don't need to fucking show every single little thing. If this was today, there would be aliens running up on the walls and swinging from beams. They'd be CGI. This was perfect.
And what you just described there is classic H.P. Lovecraft. Like he wouldn't describe his monsters in too much detail. He would like let your imagination kind of run with it. Most of his monsters were usually described as being undescribable. So I think that's they kind of they took that lesson in this movie. And yeah, the little glimpses we get, these creatures are very kind of Lovecraft inspired in the sense that a lot of his monsters had like tentacles and they were octopus like. And Carpenter, he's a huge Lovecraft fan. Like the Thing, the monster itself is very inspired by Lovecraft. Even the idea of finding the Thing frozen in ice, that's very inspired by the story At the Mountains of Madness, which inspired the title of this movie.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you what your experience with H.P. Lovecraft is, because as far as I know, I just know Cthulhu, and then the Stuart Gordon, Brian Usna, like they're From Beyond and Reanimator. Like I've seen those movies.
Mhm.
Really quick, I just want to say the one line that I fucking love, and it kind of goes back to what you were just saying about how he doesn't describe the monsters, is when he's like, the horrors of hundreds of centuries were about to descend upon our world. I was like, God, that freaked me out for some reason.
I was thinking this movie, the screenplay is credited to Michael DeLuca, who
Oh
we
yeah.
recently talked about his work in Freddy's Dead. And
Mm,
to me, he knocks it out of the park here, much better than he did in that movie.
right. I recognize the name. I did not look it up though.
Oh, going back to H.P. Lovecraft, it's funny, like his work is kind of like Edgar Allan Poe. It's very loosely adapted. When Hollywood takes, their work, whether it's Poe or Lovecraft, they usually just kind of take it and run with it. So there's Reanimator, obviously, movie called Castle Freak, which is actually one of my favorite Lovecraft adaptations. Jeffrey Combs is in that too.
Mm,
But Color Out of Space is kind of interesting with Nick Cage. But as far as the actual his literary work, I have like the complete works of H.P. Lovecraft in a audiobook on my phone, and every now
whoa.
and then I'll listen to a story or two. But yeah, I would say I'm a fan. Yeah,
Well, am I crazy? But this is a saying, right? Lovecraftian?
yeah.
Okay, 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 okay.
And that's usually, you would say that to describe some sort of cosmic horror or, monsters that look like octopuses like Cthulhu. Or, I mean, I guess, Guillermo del Toro's movies are very Lovecraftian, a lot of
Mm.
Carpenter's. So he has had a huge impact on horror literature and horror movies for sure.
Oh, War of the Worlds. There's another one, right?
No, that's H.G. Wells.
Oh, bleh. Okay. Damn. Okay, so before we wrap up here, the ending is, it's something that I'm pretty confused about. I don't know what your thoughts are, but I like it. I liked it, and basically what it is, if I'm recollecting it correctly, the book gets unleashed on the world. What's his face? Sam Neill unleashes the book to everybody. It gets sold. Everybody sees it. Becomes a movie, and then he escapes the mental asylum, and he gets to go see the movie of the story that he just experienced, and basically the movie catches up with the current moment that he's in.
Yeah, that sounds about right. To tell you the truth, I've never loved this ending. Yeah,
Oh
it feels a little bit anticlimactic to me. I don't know what an ending to this movie I would have been satisfied with because I am kind of so confused in a good way by the end of this movie that, yeah, I'm not sure what I would want or what I would expect. But yeah, him kind of watching the movie we just watched, I don't love it.
I mean, honestly, I don't love it either, but it is kind of classic Carpenter where it just ends on like Tom Atkins, no, shut it off, or the They Live just kind of ending abruptly. Like John Carpenter kind of does this shit a lot.
Oh, and it's a total downer. It
Yeah.
should be said, John Carpenter considers this movie to be part of his Apocalypse trilogy.
Yeah,
His three movies about the end of the world, and the other two are The Thing and Prince of Darkness.
which we are covering soon.
Can't wait.
All right, all right. No, I did look that up and I was like, that's cool that he's got like his own little George A. Romero trilogy of his movie, even though those are more connected, I think, than these, but I don't know actually.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just in the sense that they are obviously all about the apocalypse and they all have, really downer endings.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely excited to check that. I know what's his name's in it, Donald Pleasance, right?
Yep.
Yeah, dude. Okay, last thing. I love this so much about John Carpenter that he does his own music. And this music, for like the first 30 seconds, I was like, oh, sweet, they got Metallica. And then I was like, wait, what is this? And I looked it up. Apparently, they wanted to get Enter Sandman. They couldn't get it. So then John Carpenter did his own, like, pretty close version.
Oh, that's hilarious. I'm surprised he didn't get sued because yeah, it is, shockingly close to Enter Sandman. It rocks. Like I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's good. I prefer his, more old-fashioned synthy scores, but yeah, this is a cool one too.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. I prefer the old stuff, but I like this, and I also loved his Halloween trilogy, the remake from 2018. Like that score was great. So talented. Love John Carpenter. You got any last minute thoughts here?
I'm just glad you could experience it for the first time and glad that it seems like this movie is getting a little more respect. It's not surprising Carpenter has so many classics, so you know, a few are gonna fall between the cracks, but I think people are starting to discover this one, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. I mean, it's got Sam Neill hot off of Jurassic Park, John Carpenter on the way down, but still, he's still up there. It's definitely worth checking out, and I'm glad that I got to experience this. So thank you, Joe.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for listening into our discussion on In the Mouth of Madness, and we will see you all tomorrow with something.